If you pay attention to the global airline industry, you'll know that nowadays they're double-decker bus airliners that fly around the world. They're called the A380. Two-tier aircraft that can bring 600 people into a single airport. The opening up of skies, allowing these competitor airlines to come into a place like South Africa, for example, may very well have damaged SAA's competitive ability. Certainly, many of the Middle Eastern airlines own these double-decker aircraft. British Airways has got a couple, Lufthansa's got a couple. If you look at OR Tambo International Airport, you'll see them parked on the apron there from time to time. Michael Joseph is the chairman of Kenya Airways. This sort of dynamism of aircraft, and it's very exciting, and countries want to encourage tourism and figure if we can get 600 people in rather than 300 at a time, that's a good deal, makes the airlines more efficient and more profitable. But you run the risk of cutting your own throat as a country when you start opening up to that kind of competition, don't you?
Yeah, I think open skies is a very good idea when you have a level playing field for everybody. You have an open skies policy in Europe. You have it in the US, but it's a level playing field.
Open skies means that everyone is allowed to compete freely wherever they like.
And land and take on new passengers. But if you look at Europe, for instance, if you have one airline that is subsidized by the government, you will get penalized by the EU. So we don't have that mechanism in Africa. So you have an open skies policy without any protection, without any level playing field. So you have big airlines flying in here who don't have any regulatory restrictions at all, and you're killing your own business. You're killing your own airlines. I just mentioned to you the example of Mauritius. You got 380s there every day. This 600 people coming. Oh, it's great for the tourism. The business ministry of tourism is very, very happy. But the fact is, you're killing your airline.
So Air Mauritius, therefore, is struggling to survive as a result of it can't compete against the huge influx of people.
I don't know exactly on SAA, but I should imagine that allowing the 380s to come here, 2-3 of them a day, kills your business.
Well, you would have seen how many routes SAA with an antiquated aircraft, antiquated being 15 years and older, the Airbuses, the gas-guzzling Airbuses, it can't compete against the far more fuel-efficient, high-density, jam-packed cattle class carriers.
And by the way, those aircraft, apparently, from what I understand, are not that profitable as well. They are not that profitable, and that's why we have a serious problem competing against them, because they have to fill them. Because once they take off, and that's one thing I've learned in the airline industry, I've learned quite a lot, but one of the things, once an aircraft takes off and has empty seats, that's lost revenue.
I mean, you guys have got a problem with that, because you've finally managed to claw your way up to 70% capacity once again. But you had 70% capacity at your peak, declined quite sharply after that, and just narrowly getting back to 70% once again. Those load factors are pretty low by global standards. They've got to be higher.
They've got to be higher, but the thing is, that's not the important thing. The important thing is not the load factor. The important thing is the yield, what they call yield, which is the revenue per passenger. And because when we're flying like we're flying now, you have to compete. So we might fly directly from, or we might fly from, say, Nairobi to London, and we can charge a certain price because it's direct. Our Middle Eastern carriers can fly via their hubs. They can undercut us by $300-400 easily. And you have to compete with that price. So you might say, okay, your flight is full. Your full flight going, it might not be profitable because of the price that you have to charge to fill that plane. And that's the dynamic of the airline and the challenge of being in the airline industry.
I find it so interesting that you've launched 3 new direct weekly flights. You've got 7 indirect flights from Nairobi to Cape Town, 3 direct flights. That goes up against your friends at Ethiopian. SAA doesn't bother trying to compete on the direct European routes, and certainly doesn't go via any of the other African hubs. How are you going to compete, considering that you've got Middle Eastern airlines flying in directly, you've got Turkish flying in directly, BA is doing direct flights from London and Gatwick into Cape Town, particularly in season. It's a ferocious, great for consumers, but lousy to be an airline.
It's an interesting question, and a question that I asked as well. I said, why are we flying 3 times a week directly when we have 7 other indirect flights? But in fact, there is a demand here, particularly from the corporates. Because of a lot of your corporates in South Africa have moved from Johannesburg to Cape Town and making it their corporate hub, they want to fly in Africa and they want direct flights. And this is to meet that corporate need more than the leisure market. It's the corporate market that we're after, that we believe is there.
But there's surely an opportunity in the leisure market as well. Anybody trying to fly out of Cape Town into other parts of the world, if they don't go via the Dubais or the Qatars, they are paying probably 2, sometimes 3 times as much in economy
Correct.
to go direct to Europe.
Yeah.
The hub opportunity, if you can do quick turnarounds in Nairobi, is there.
Well, that's, if you look at the, I mean, another term I used is bank. That you have these banks, which means that you have a number of hours per day when all your aircraft arrive and leave, so you can have a transit within 1.5 hours. And this is, we believe that with this direct flight, we arrive into Nairobi at the right time to catch our flights going to the rest of Africa and to Europe. So I think it's the corporate market we're after, but you have to create the demand. The demand doesn't start straight away. The demand is there once we've launched. We're not expecting this to make money in the first year. But
are you committing to 3 years?
Yes,
at least.
Absolutely, because you can commit to 1 year. But after 1 year, you'll say, well, let's kill this plane, to kill this flight. So no, it's a 3-year deal. And obviously you have to look at the network effect, not just what do they call it, point-to-point effect. You have to look at the network effect.
And your shareholders, are they buying into the strategy? Because banks, we know, are very, very difficult and can be incredibly fickle. Governments even more so.
Oh yes, absolutely. All these routes are always approved by the board before they go. So the strategy is approved by the board. And remember, we plan routes 18 to 12 months before we even start to fly. So these are a long time before when we start to plan these routes. They don't, you don't plan them like 3 weeks in advance. It takes a lot of planning to do them. So yeah, they're signed off by the board. The board in Kenya Airways, of course, is a very tough board, because now you have the government representatives on your board, you have the banks on your board, which is not an easy thing to be a chairman of a board with.
But that's a good thing, isn't it? I mean, it's not pleasant, but
no,
from a stakeholder point of view, that's surely good.
It's a good from a governance point of view, and just to say that I think that boards are starting to grow up to understand what is their role, what is the role of the board of directors. Many people join boards of directors of airlines because of the perks, But now you're having people like the banks, the government on your board. They know what their role is to be a governance role, not sort of say complain about lost luggage or plane that is late and things like that. And I think that's good. It is good, but it keeps you on your toes.
But it certainly does. I mean, does it ever run the risk of not being a constructive engagement when you've got vested interests and substantial vested interests on either side of the boardroom table?
That's why you have a chairman like me.
Oh, how tough are you? Are you able to crack the whip?
As I say to many people, I am not a Democrat. I'm a dictator.
Is that a good thing?
Sometimes for a turnaround, I think you need it.
For a guy who knows nothing about the airline industry, though, in a room with a government and bankers who don't know anything about the airline industry, is that quite high risk?
It's like in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. So no, I think it's to be serious. I think it is a good thing. I think that what we've done and what I've been able to do with a strong chairman role, bringing in a strong CEO, I think as long as we can demonstrate to the board that we are actually making progress, both operationally and financially, I think then you have the support of the board. The jury's still out, I must say. It's only a year and a half now, so maybe they'll kick me out after another year or so. But I think the jury's still out, but I think we are making good progress. And I think the boards, both the banks, who are skeptics and at best on the airline industry and were not willingly come into changing their loans into equity. I think they were pushed into having to do this. They are protected by the government to a large extent. I think are quite skeptical, but I think it's a wait and see to see if we can do this. You've seen from the SAA, it's not an easy journey. It's not a short journey. It's a long journey. It's a long term. It's 3-4 years before you see the results. And you have to buy airplanes now before you see them in 5 years' time. These kind of things. It's a long-term journey.
Michael Joseph, we must leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us on Taking Stock. It really is an exciting and dynamic industry, particularly on this continent, which hasn't had that much competition for an awfully long time. Kenya seeking to repair itself. Ethiopian seeking to dominate the market with more than 100 aircraft. Middle Eastern airlines coming in. British Airways bringing more direct routes into this market. And SAA doing its very best to reposition itself in this very, very feisty and tightly fought market. Great for you as a consumer. Is it great for all of the shareholders? Well, time will tell. Thanks for watching Taking Stock. Good night.